A very good evening. Welcome to Face the Nation. I'm Fundo Mabalani, standing in for Clement Manyatela this evening. It's great to have you with us on the SABC. So on the show tonight, we'll speak to ANC's Jeff Radebe in his capacity as ANC KZN convener on the inquest into the death of former ANC President and Nobel Peace Prize laureate Chief Albert Luthuli. We'll also speak to him in his capacity as former special envoy on investment. This is on the appointment of Mcebisi Jonas as special envoy to the United States. Then straight after that, we'll be joined by CAPRISA. That's the Center for AIDS Program of Research in South Africa. They've been significantly impacted by the US NHI cuts of active research grants. Then we'll close off the show with Gauteng Premier Panyaza. He signed what many are saying is a landmark agreement today to essentially bring together the Gauteng provincial government, SAPS, municipal police departments and districts, as well as local municipalities, all in an effort to jointly fight crime in the province. But first, my comment. So, a cursory glance at commentary on the appointment of Mcebisi Jonas as special envoy to the United States indicated a welcoming of the appointment to a great extent yesterday. The president in his SONA address had, of course, also committed to send an envoy to mend relations. Just listen to this.
The work that we do and what we stand for does need to be explained to many key players, especially to our trading partners and the many countries and leaders that we interact with on the global stage. And with a view of explaining the positions that we have taken, and in particular, the objectives that we wish to achieve during our presidency of the G20, I have decided to send a delegation of government and other leaders to various capitals on our continent across the world. This delegation will interact with various key players on a variety of matters that affect South Africa's interests. I will direct that they leave as soon as possible to interact with various key players on our continent and in the world, so that our presidency of the G20 objectives can be well explained.
So, inasmuch as the identity of the individual or individuals was unknown, it was expected, as we heard there. And from business to civil society, many yesterday spoke of Jonas's extensive experience, having served previously as one of 4 presidential investment envoys back in 2018. He was, of course, also the country's deputy finance minister under former President Jacob Zuma. So his suitability was also then echoed by the presidency's Vincent Magwenya. Have a listen to this yesterday.
The president has recognized the sense of urgency for us to work on enabling the resetting of the relationship between South Africa and the United States. And this appointment is targeted at that. So the process to appoint an ambassador is a separate process. Ambassadors often have bureaucratic hurdles to jump over. The special envoy does not have the burden of bureaucracy. He will be reporting directly to the president.
And it must be stated just there that we had reached out to the presidency, but unfortunately for now, they'll not be communicating further on this matter. We've also reached out to DIRCO, and of course we had invited Mr. Mcebisi Jonas. But as stated, many were generally supportive of the appointment until 2 American publications, that's Breitbart News Network and National Review, which are supportive of US President Donald Trump. They dug up anti-Trump comments by Mcebisi Jonas from a speech in 2020. Now, that has seemingly divided the views. There are those who believe the emergence of the video shouldn't change anything. Vice President J.D. Vance and Secretary of State Marco Rubio held different views about Trump before, and they've moved beyond that point. Equally, they argue that Mr. Jonas made those comments 5 years ago, and most certainly he was nowhere near the United States on a role such as this one that he has now accepted. Others, though, are not so convinced. They argue that you can't compare Jonas to JD and Marco. They're Americans, and it was Donald Trump's prerogative to look beyond the comments of Vance and Rubio. And we honestly don't know the conversation that took place before they moved beyond that point. But all of that aside, it might neither be here nor there. My preoccupation is on what commentators have stated is at the heart of this deteriorating relationship. The ICJ case, South Africa's non-aligned stance on Russia's invasion of the Ukraine, we know where we stood, the country's relationship with China, their role in BRICS, and the relationship with Iran. This is foreign policy, and it's of a sovereign state as to whom they align with. So the question is, whether it matters who the individual is that is sent to mend the relationship or identify investment opportunities at this point, or what matters will be the contents of the conversation that is had at that level. And the concessions that probably might have to be made, especially with just 90 days, this window period to negotiate new tariffs. So is that not something that should perhaps preoccupy many as opposed to the video? This now segues us perfectly to our question this evening. We're asking, how effective do you think Mcebisi Jonas will be as South Africa's special envoy to the United States? And one man who's no stranger to this unique task is ANC KZN convener and former special presidential envoy on investment, Jeff Radebe. He was appointed by President Cyril Ramaphosa in 2019 to promote South Africa as an investment destination. He joins us now via video link. Good evening, Mr. Radebe. Thank you very much for joining us on the program. Now, as stated in that intro, you are no stranger to such a role as envoy, albeit specifically for investment. Just talk us through what would be required of Mr. Jonas in this role.
Well, let me put it this way, that currently, besides being the convener of the ANC in KwaZulu-Natal for the provincial task team, I'm the President's special envoy to the Great Lakes region, because the issue of the special investment envoy ended a few years ago when we achieved or attained our objectives of making sure that we bring investment into the South African economy. But be that as it may, an envoy is a head of state emissary to convey messages to another head of state, which is distinguished and distinguishable from that of a high commissioner or an ambassador. So it is a very specific mission that the head of state does employ in order to ensure that specific messages are conveyed to another head of state.
And then, Mr. Radebe, the strategy employed, though, to decide to go this route first, because there were those that had expected perhaps a different announcement, that of the replacement of Ambassador Ibrahim Rasool. But it seemed that this became the announcement first. So is this perhaps meant to somewhat lay the foundation for an ambassador when he eventually is appointed?
Well, I'm no longer in government, so I will not be averse to the intricacies of what took place prior to the appointment of my colleague, Mcebisi Jonas, as a special envoy to the United States of America. I can only speak more generally that my perception is that the President has taken into account the experience of Mcebisi Jonas, being a person who has a track record in working in government, firstly in the Eastern Cape, as well as being a Deputy Minister of Finance, but more recently being a special investment envoy of the President, and also currently has been the chairperson of one of the biggest communications company, MTN. I think he is well equipped to discharge this responsibility.
And I think, Ms. Radebe, a number of commentators, just from yesterday alone, seem to share your views that when it comes to experience, they have no doubt that he would be equal to the task. But the issue has been around perhaps the issues that have been raised and really at the heart of this matter. But I just want us to try and fix your video, because a very important conversation that we're having. We're just going to take a quick ad break, and then we'll come back and just follow up on this important conversation around some of the key issues which they say at the heart are really the ICJ matter against Israel, also our relationship with China, our relationship with Iran, and our non-aligned stance when it came to Russia invading Ukraine. So we'll touch on that in just a moment. Let's quickly take an ad break. Welcome back. Thank you very much for staying with us. We continue our conversation on the appointment of Mcebisi Jonas as special envoy to the United States. And we must apologize firstly on that specific line with Jeff Radebe. We are trying to re-establish the line. But let's quickly check some of your tweets now. We've been asking you the question of how effective do you think Mr. Mcebisi Jonas would be as South Africa's special envoy to the United States? A number of you have already commented. Let's just look at some of those comments. Bono says, I only know about him being the Deputy Finance Minister and a Member of Parliament under Zuma's administration. I'm not sure why he's trusted to lead the envoy to try and resolve the USSA differences, but we'll give him the benefit of the doubt. Let's see what happens next. Wazalendo says Special Envoy Jonas's success will be based on what he's bringing to the bargaining table because Donald Trump is a transactional president and facts don't mean much to him unless he gets his way. The best example is the fake white genocide in South Africa, obstacles ICJ case. And that is a sentiment that many commentators have shared, Wazalendo. So it will be interesting when we do re-establish the line with Jeff Radebe. Those are the questions we will be posing around. These are the fundamental issues that speak to our foreign policy, being the ICJ case among those. To this now, under Trump, the U.S. government has halted funding for the U.S. President's Emergency Plan for AIDS Relief, PEPFAR, a global health investment introduced back in 2003. In the past year, South Africa received about $440 million in PEPFAR funding, accounting for 22% of the country's $2.56 billion HIV budget. With a halt in funding, counseling initiatives and programs, including testing, education and community support, have all been shut down. The Center for the AIDS Program of Research in South Africa, CAPRISA, is one of the organizations affected. CAPRISA's Professor Kogi Naidoo, who's the Deputy Director and Head of the Treatment Research Program, talked to us on the impact of the U.S. funding cuts on the organization. Good evening, Professor. Thank you very much for joining us on the program. Now, Professor, it's our understanding that under U.S. President Donald Trump, the U.S. National Institute of Health, that's the NIH, has cancelled roughly 770 active research grants, as of the 7th of April. And nearly 29% of those research related to HIV and AIDS. We'd like for you to put it into context for us. How have these cuts had an impact on CAPRISA's HIV and TB research?
Good evening, Mfundo, and a very good evening to your listeners. The research sector in South Africa is largely funded by the U.S. National Institutes of Health. The health system, however, has been largely funded through the United States International Aid Development Agency, USAID, as well as PEPFAR. When we talk specifically about NIH grants, we could be affected in one of several ways. The first is if there's a direct cut to funding NIH grants to South Africa, and that has not occurred to CAPRISA as yet. The direct cut to our clinical trials units in South Africa has only affected one clinical trials unit, and that is at the University of Witwatersrand. Mm-hmm. The second way that we may be affected is through cuts through our partner institutions in the US. And as you may be aware in the media, the Trump administration has been cutting large research grants to several very highly regarded U.S. institutions. Number one being Columbia University, that was hard hit around the 7th of February earlier this year. And so we partner with scientists at Columbia University, and we've applied and have been successful at CAPRISA in being awarded competitive research grants for tuberculosis research and HIV research through our partnerships at Columbia University. We also have partnerships at Harvard University, for example, and they're being threatened right now with $2 billion threat of withdrawal of US funding grants. So those are the two direct mechanisms. We've been affected already through the suspension of one of our grants that has been affected through Columbia being hard hit by the Trump administration. In the second way we've been hit is there's 3 research grants that came via USAID, and these cuts occurred very early on in the year, towards the end of January and the middle of February, where USAID funded studies in HIV vaccine prevention, notably the brilliant consortium that was poised to develop the very first Africa-generated HIV vaccine for the prevention of HIV transmission. It impacted a large consortium that were investigating female-controlled HIV prevention technologies, and that was called the Matrix Consortium. So CAPRISA was impacted through the loss of the Matrix grant and the Brilliant grant, that's the HIV vaccine. And the third way we were impacted is that, as you may be aware, there was a large clinical trial that published their findings in the middle of 2024, demonstrating 100% efficacy of a new HIV prevention technology called lenacapavir. And so we were doing a qualitative research study to understand user experiences and uptake and acceptability of the lenacapavir, and so that was the third study there that was affected. Our work with the Columbia University was really around understanding how TB is transmitted in communities. Where does the transmission occur, so that we can target how we screen for tuberculosis and don't waste resources screening everyone, but rather to be a very targeted screening effort. And so that was withdrawn through our funding cuts at Columbia University. Of course, CAPRISA is funded and that was about 10% of our total funding. But
because that was going to be my next question around the financial value of that funding cut. And where does this leave you now with all the work that you had already done?
Sure. So the funding value, it was about $1 million, which is roughly around 20 million rand. And so we took the costs upon ourselves because it was immediate cessation of funding, immediate withdrawal, and a work stop order. So CAPRISA took it upon themselves to follow participants up for safety, to call them back into our facilities, to withdraw the technologies that women had inserted into them to help them fight off HIV infection acquisition. And we also continued with safety follow-up, which was the ethically correct thing to do in this scenario.
Pardon me for interjecting there. So there's absolutely no way to continue here. When you speak of these clinical trials, specifically the one in Wits, where you say now you had to call back the participants, and if you had to remove specific elements that were now put into them, they had to be withdrawn. There was absolutely no way that these funds could have been raised.
There was no way, because many of these studies are cost reimbursive, meaning you expend money and then you submit an invoice and then you get paid for it. The products are also highly controlled. You do not get additional products in the event of a sudden withdrawal of funding or a sudden stop in the study. So you can't continue patients on products after the withdrawal. Once there's a stop, that means you actually have to immediately cease all activities. In this case, CAPRISA had its own financial resources because we have to put participant safety first. But unfortunately, that is not always possible, given the way the funding is structured and the way products are made available to scientists for evaluation.
So these are the real impacts of this cut. But then what was the response of these participants when they heard now that essentially they're going to feel the impact when they were called back to say any of those products we have to now remove?
You know, we spend decades garnering trust from communities in which to conduct research. We bring communities along with us to be equal participants in the scientific process. When you call a patient in, despite the counseling, and despite, you're trying to walk them through the chain of events, they really start questioning the validity of science. And they would question you as to why are you suddenly removing a product. It raises suspicion. It raises mistrust of the whole scientific process. Our communities don't quickly understand that these matters are completely out of our control. And when a funder decides to suddenly cease stopping a trial that has nothing to do with the science, nothing to do with the goal that we were bent on pursuing in the objective of the research, but purely to just stop the science by withdrawing money in a punitive action. So it does raise a lot of confusion. It does raise a lot of questions, and it's going to take us years to build that back again.
And are there no concerns around the general health of these participants right now? Because some would think, legitimately, they would think if you're withdrawing mid-term, you're withdrawing this product, what does it mean for me? If perhaps it was one of the vaccines that were being tried, this is a person that would have been encouraged to continue to be intimate without using protection, and then mid-term, while the process is still in motion, they brought back to say, we're removing the products, continue with your life. Has there been no concern?
So very often in HIV prevention trials, well, as standard practice in HIV prevention trials, women are encouraged to use additional methods of contraception. Right. The products that we were using here, none of the vaccines actually got into participants. They were still in the process of setting up those studies to evaluate the vaccines. The products that we were testing were well-established safety. The phase 2A, 2B trials were already established, where safety and efficacy had been established through earlier phase clinical trials. These were rather implementation trials done in other populations to ensure the generalizability of the research findings to all types of populations, all types of women living in different geographic settings. So the safety had been established, but the issue here is that we wanted to look at long-term efficacy. So we're going to lose that data forever. All those investments that were put in to set up the trial, to enroll participants, to give them the product is all lost, because you aren't able to follow patients through to establish the efficacy. Sudden withdrawal of product is usually accompanied by very intensive counseling, as participants are provided with information to call the research sites, to provide us with information to seek care should anything untoward occur. In addition, the contact with the participant is kept open, but that may not always be possible if an entire research site has to shut down. And that may be true for other units in the country.
So how are you working to bridge the funding gap to continue this critical work around HIV and TB?
It's unfortunate that the funding loss has created such a paralysis and has been so sudden. Had we had years or months to prepare for this, then we would have been in a far better position to recover. But as it stands, we started several months ago to diversify our funding base, in which we have commenced already with applying for non-US research funding for some of our research ideas. Having such a huge dependence on just US federal funding has actually created this very unfortunate vulnerability. Diversifying the funding, having more young scientists apply for grants to support their work is actually is one of the key strategies that we've engaged with. Obviously, we're going to be in a funding shortfall for the next 12 to 24 months. It takes several months to prepare a competitive grant application, to have it reviewed, and then for it to be scored favorably enough for you to get awarded a grant funding, because this entire process is highly competitive. The best ideas in the world are pitted against each other, and only one or possibly just a handful will get funded to move forward. So scientists are very accustomed to that sort of research environment that's highly innovative, highly cutting edge, highly competitive. However, it takes years to prepare a competitive application to a point at which the funding flows back to you to do the work. So this is going to create a hiatus, it's going to create a gap, and it will cause an existential crisis in the scientific world, not just in South Africa, but globally.
A very worrying picture that you paint there. Professor, thank you very much for your time this evening. That's CAPRISA's Professor Kogi Naidoo speaking to us. Now let's recap our question. We're asking, how effective do you think Mcebisi Jonas will be as South Africa's special envoy to the United States? This remains the big story this week. Let's look at some of your comments. Buhle says, good evening, Mfundo. Good evening, Buhle. Not all days are the same. South Africa needs steady hands in uncertain times. I believe Mcebisi Jonas, as known for his integrity and leadership, is trusted to represent us well as special envoy to the United States, given all the necessary support to make an impact. Robert Tata say, hi Mfundo. Hi Robert Tata. Mcebisi Jonas has such an impeccable track record and will undoubtedly represent the country, but mending ties with the US, it will be difficult to sway Trump's attitude towards our country. Good luck to Mcebisi. He most certainly will be needing the luck, as many have said. The minimalist says, hi Mfundo. Hello minimalist. I don't have any hope. The question is, why do African countries go to the United States as individual countries instead of delegates from the African Union negotiating as a unit for the continent, like the European Union does for the European countries? Very interesting perspective there. There have been numerous people, scholars as well, that have always felt that if you're going to such superpowers, economies with such a great GDP, you probably would need to come in and negotiate as a continent, not necessarily as an individual country with a smaller GDP. So a perspective that some would share. Let's just listen to some voice notes now.
Good evening, Mfundo. Mcebisi Jonas is a suitable candidate for that role as a special envoy to America. But I think Donald Trump has reached a point of no return when it comes to South Africa. There's nothing that we can do to appease him. The man is on high horse. He will never change his mind anytime soon. So as a country, we must cut our losses and move forward. We have got BRICS, so what do we still need from America? Thank you very much. Peter Maila Machava from Letswatla.
Good evening, Mfundo. My take on this is that not all the days are the same, and in these uncertain times, South Africa does need steady hands. I believe that Mcebisi Jonas, who is widely known for his integrity and the leadership that he has in him, can be widely trusted to represent us quite well to the US, provided that he receives the necessary support to make a real impact. This is Buhle. Thank you.
All right, very interesting comments there. Do keep them coming. After the break, we'll be speaking to Gauteng Premier Panyaza today. He signed that landmark agreement that will see the Gauteng provincial government, as well as SAPS, as well as municipalities, working hand in hand to deal with policing issues in the province. Welcome back. Thank you very much for joining us. Now, the Gauteng provincial government has signed an agreement allowing for intergovernmental cooperation between the South African Police Service, municipal law enforcement agencies and local municipalities across the province. Now, this is in order to intensify the fight against crime. First announced at the State of the Province address, the Safety and Security Memorandum of Understanding aims for better coordination among Gauteng law enforcement agencies. Gauteng Premier Panyaza joins me now in studio to talk a bit more on this. Good evening, Premier. Thank you very much for joining us.
No, thank you so much. Are you well?
No, I'm well. It's a pleasure to have you with us on Face the Nation.
Thanks for holding on.
Talk to us about this landmark agreement, as many are referring to.
Yeah.
I mean, you've got the Gauteng government here, you've got SAPS as well, you've got municipal law enforcement, the districts, local municipality. Talk to us about
private security companies as well.
All right.
Yes. I mean, when you conceptualize the idea, it was just to minimize duplication so that all of us can plan from the center and identify priority crimes and release resources that are needed to contain those priority crimes. It's quite clear in Gauteng that murder is high, GBV, you have got the kidnapping, hijackings, and you also have a serious attack on our installations in terms of You've got Zamazamas, and you've got people that are destroying traffic lights and vandalizing various installations. So you can't have one municipality planning on its own. It might not have the capacity, might not have the resources, the skill and the talent. So what we said, let's bring all these things under one roof, under the command of the SAPS, and plan it in a manner that we can support each other. For example, if you have to invade the CBD to reclaim hijacked buildings, there's no way that Johannesburg JMPD alone can be in a position to do so. But if you bring Tshwane, you bring Ekurhuleni, you bring Sidibeng, you bring Western, and you bring private security companies, we can clock the CBD of Johannesburg, flush out to those people that are doing wrong things, and be in a position to defend ourselves. So it's indeed groundbreaking, and I want to thank the mayors and the chief of police, but also our provincial commissioner, that they've been hard at work to ensure that this agreement is legal and this agreement has effect.
If we had to be a bit more granular on how this will all work, who would then make the determination of the resources needed? Would it be now the police commissioner saying that the program or the operation we're going to run now is in the Johannesburg CBD, and we need Ekurhuleni as well, we're going to need Tshwane, so they would make the determination? Yeah,
the command and control is with the SAPS. We are providing the relevant support to the SAPS because they've got all the necessary resources. They've got the intelligence, they've got various units, that the TRT and other. For example, we've been having a problem of taxi violence in our province. With this agreement, if we know there is a taxi violence in a certain area, all of us can go there, crowd them out, ensure that we clean them out in terms of their behavior and conduct. So the control is with the SAPS. But if you have traffic police, local police, provincial police, and you also have private security companies, we are of the view that it can assist us. Because crime in Gauteng, I must be honest with you, is completely out of control. And if we can't manage it and come with new ideas, we can't expect it to go down. Yes, the numbers are going down, but it's just minimum. We just have to accelerate it. And we really believe that today's agreement is assisting us to release resources. For example, we've got informal settlements that are no-go area. You go to Oliven, or you go to Soshanguve, but one municipality can't clean that. But if we have everyone, we've got all the resources, the helicopters, the drones, you've got the technology that we have. We really believe that it will assist us to turn the situation in Gauteng.
But Premier, given the very limited resources in all these municipalities, when you're going to reallocate some of the resources to a specific area where you're now going to have your operation, would that now not leave a gap where perhaps they would have stabilized crime in that area, but if you've taken the resources out now, you create a new problem in that area? How was that something that you addressed maybe in your deliberations before this decision to sign on the agreement?
Not necessarily. We meet every Tuesday to plan for the week ahead. So, for example, if we have to take resources out of Ekurhuleni, either they've got reserves or they can ask other people that are on leave not to be on leave so that they can be standby. So we manage it carefully in terms of the resources.
So it wouldn't be something like a month operation where you've taken resources out of a specific municipality. You're saying it's on an operation, something that could probably last 2 days or so.
Yeah, it is a weekly operation. We've targeted certain days. We know, for example, the areas where you can go there and find 18 taverns that are not registered. Or you can go in the middle of any city and find nightclubs that are not registered. But you can't tackle that if you're alone. So you have to bring everyone, the liquor board. We also have to bring the Home Affairs unit, national traffic officers and all other related matters. So the arrangement today, I must be honest, is groundbreaking, very important. I think those that are in the fight against crime will appreciate that to plan from the center. I mean, for example, at the State of the Nation province address, we identified 450 people that are causing all the crime in Gauteng. The cash heist is them, kidnappings is them, killing of hired killings is them. So we've been monitoring them. So because we've been monitoring them, 119 of that 450 had already been arrested. Unfortunately, 19 of them have been killed in the execution of the responsibilities of the police. We have now a war room where we monitor all these things. So we know which areas is starting to be problematic, and we know which crime is starting to rise in our province. So we don't have to wait for crime stats by the minister. On the basis of the tracking, on the basis of planning, on the basis of the reports we're getting from the ground, we know which specific area needs to be hit. But you can't do that as a small municipality like Mfuleni or as a small municipality when people in that area are involved in illegal mining, for example. But if you bring all the firepower of all arms of the state in terms of law enforcement, we really believe that we can make an impact, we can make proper changes. Yeah.
But if it's now done perhaps between 2 or 3 days or in a week, does it not address the problem where you apprehend those that need to be apprehended, but as soon as you leave, then you could see that level of criminality resurfacing in the area? What was the decision to guard against that, perhaps the resurfacing of criminality in that specific area, once you've had all the resources now being reallocated elsewhere?
Take, for example, early hours of this morning, we arrested almost 138 people. So where are they? They're in jail. They're not back in that community. Obviously, others will apply for bail and other related matters. But the 138 that we have arrested means that we have been monitoring them. We know their acts, we've got their evidence, so that you don't arrest somebody today, tomorrow they are released. So we have been evidence-based, intelligence-driven, and monitoring in a manner that we've picked up even things that we never thought we'd pick up. So we can't be there forever when we've removed the 138 that we know. Yeah. We must go to another area where probably we've got 28 to deal with. So we've got Soshanguve, Oliven, Deep Sloot, and Orange Farm as areas that need our immediate intervention.
And we've reported extensively on these. I'm sure even the community of Soshanguve would be quite heartened to hear that they're on the radar. They'll be benefiting from this.
Because if you don't tackle them there, I mean, check the car that was stolen where in Soshanguve and the child was killed. We found the perpetrators in the VAL. But the VAL might not know that person because they've not committed that crime in the VAL. So they might just allow him to move around. But because all of us are now planning for the center, we can alert the VAL and say, we are looking for this particular individual. They don't necessarily have to leave the VAL and come to Soshanguve, but they can arrest that person and hand over to us. That is why we say we are eliminating the borderless approach that we've been working from, which has really created serious problems. But for now, we're excited as the province. As they say, the taste is in the pudding, or you'll taste it in a manner that we see results. And we are looking forward that South Africans will see immediate results.
And then the legal framework around roping in the private sector here and the financial implications, because they are for profit, essentially, when they're protecting citizens. Yes, they want to do a noble cause, but there's profitability where they're concerned. So what are the financial implications of bringing on the private security to assist in the resources issue?
Actually, they're bringing expertise, they're bringing additional resources that we don't have. Remember, in our province in particular, which is unfortunate, in some areas we've got more private security than the actual law enforcement agencies.
Yeah. Quite unfortunate.
Which is very unfortunate. And they've got CCTV cameras, they've got sophisticated communication network, and in some instances, they are more ready than the law enforcement agencies. So our approach, therefore, is let's bring everyone that is fighting crime so that we don't duplicate and we don't plan separately, but we plan from the center. And majority of the private security companies have brought their resources. They're not looking for anything in return, because what we are doing, it minimizes their responsibilities. Because if you can't stop crime in Oliven, they will come in that private area to steal something out of that community. So if we fight, all of us across all the province, we really believe that it will assist us to push back the frontiers of crime in our province.
So just for clarity, they are bringing in their resources with no expectation that if they brought in their vehicles, they brought in their security guards, everybody else would not be remunerated, or there is something symbolically that would be paid towards this.
And we've been working like that actually long. It's just that now we are coordinating it properly. But there are some private companies, I must be honest, they are putting their own money. I mean, the project that we're involved to track 450 gangsters or criminals that are causing problems, it's funded mainly by the private sector, who said that every month we'll put this amount of money so that these particular people are apprehended. So it's not that they are looking for profit, but they themselves, they are aware that if you can't get the province right, you won't attract investment, you won't have tourists, and many families will leave our province because there's no one that will be prepared to raise their families in an environment where you feel that you're in a war zone.
No, most certainly the crime levels here are untenable at this point.
They're too high. We just have to find a new mechanism of fighting crime.
But when does this come into effect then?
No, we signed today. We have piloted it before. We meet every Tuesday, so we've tested it, and that is why we now feel that we are ready to make it public, because we didn't want to unleash something that will collapse tomorrow. So because we've been testing it and working in this format for quite some time, and we can see the results, we felt that it's now proper that we deposit in the public space.
You speak about vandalism of infrastructure. This has caused a lot of problems, from our water issues in the province to electricity supply issues as well. It's among the G13, the issues that are of priority for you in this specific term. Now, how will the infrastructure issues be dealt with in this memorandum of understanding?
No, we're convinced there's a syndicate. There are people that have taken a decision that they want to take copper from our traffic lights. We're quite convinced that there are people that want to illegally connect water and electricity. We're also convinced that there are people that are taking our street lights. So our approach was, you can't fix a traffic light that will be broken the following day. Let's gun for these syndicates first, clear them out. And we've been doing that. And in an area, when we've cleaned them up, then we fix the traffic lights or the street lights or any other installation that they've destroyed. But the level of vandalism is also at the peak. We don't know why. But
because
we really
it seems there's a
believe
benefit to it. If they're taking the copper cables, there's most certainly demand. So meaning, do you not deal also with those who are paying for this copper cable? Do you not deal with them? Because at some point there was an initiative, I remember, when the late Minister of Public Enterprises was still alive, Pravin Gordhan. There was talk around probably looking to regularize that specific industry where metal, scrap metal, if you're going to be a person that buys scrap metal, you're going to need to be registered. So now we've got all of this vandalism that's taking place, but has that effort been moved any much forward to ensure that we're regularizing this specific industry of purchasing scrap metals?
We've closed 400 of those scrap metals in the province because they were not properly registered, or they're not keeping the proper records, because we have to keep the proper records to say who handed over this item and all that things. What we want to argue, Mfundo, is that the Zamazama underworld, now that they've been closed out underneath, they've come up and they indeed are taking our infrastructure. We've asked the relevant law enforcement agencies to assist us with the intelligence so that we can stop them. There are some areas late at night, you see people wearing blankets that don't know where they're coming from, where they're going, are taking certain installations. So you can't do that when you are just a municipality or you are just a province. We have to bring everyone who can bring all the relevant information. But we are quite convinced now that there's a clear syndicate that is targeting this. In some instances, it's politically motivated. There are some people that believe if they can either cut off electricity, make people angry, they know that it's a benefit of their political parties, or cut off water in a certain area, or create problems with transformers and many other things. But with what we have now gathered...
So you're saying, pardon me, that we have to just ask more on that specific point, because I remember the Johannesburg mayor had been informed of some sort of a plot to almost delegitimize his administration and his efforts. And it was stated that perhaps there were those that were sabotaging them insofar as the water issues in Johannesburg. So are you saying that now there's been extensive investigations around this, that there's probably some truth to it, that to a certain extent there could be sabotage? It's not just elements of criminality.
No, it's not related to that one. That one, Randwood, I think you have already issued a statement that there's no such. What we are talking about is when in an informal settlement or in a certain community, people deliberately destroy infrastructure so that people can be against government or feel otherwise against government, while advancing their interest either to stand as independent candidates during by-elections.
And this has been proven.
This has been proven. So, and that's the intelligence that we've picked up. And that is why we feel that before you can make major repairs, you need to be sure that you can't make a repair on something that will be destroyed again. We need to be sure that those that have destroyed that infrastructure have been identified, appropriately dealt with, so that by the time you make those changes, you make changes knowingly that they will be permanent or sustainable. Then that's the approach and the mentality that we have taken, and we remain hopeful it will assist us. Obviously, people are impatient, because if a traffic light does not work, people don't mind. They just want the traffic light to work. They don't care whether there is a syndicate or the people that are deliberately destroying them. But you know, me and you can get out here, okay, the traffic light is functional. When you come tomorrow morning, it's destroyed. You know? So we need to fix all those things. And we really believe that with the agreement today, we have the foot soldiers now, we've got the resources, we've got the capabilities that will assist us to defeat this unfortunate situation.
And then, Premier, just to get your views, you could probably feel this is beyond your purview, but with the global dynamics and the shift that we're seeing around the tariffs, you spoke at the State of the Province address around the Tshwane automotive industry. I mean, you had grand plans about how you're going to create more employment, specifically in Tshwane. Now with these tariffs, the automotive industry is going to be extremely impacted. There's a baseline of 10% now. How is the province looking to cushion this specific industry? Because you spoke so highly about it, that it was going to stimulate the economy, but also create the much needed jobs.
We have to be patient. We don't have to be emotional, and we have to be clear. Unfortunately, I see this as an opportunity to have new markets. If those that feel that either our products or whatever that we are selling to the world, it's not good for their country, we have to look elsewhere. And our president has been hard at work. We've already met with the European Union on some of the arrangements that they've met. And there are some countries that have knocked at our doors that they want to work with us. But we have to be patient at all levels. If you are going to be retaliatory or angry or emotional, we'll miss a point. Unfortunately, everyone, especially those that hate us, they want to make South Africa irrelevant on the global stage. And they've gone all out, either through misinformation or doing things that they feel that will harm our economy. We need to plan maturely. We need to respond appropriately, but in a manner that will assist us to protect not only the sovereignty of our country, but also the economy of our country. And I see this as a huge opportunity to explore alternative markets. Our participation in BRICS, it's one aspect that we can explore further. But the reality is that those that are against us now have a footprint in our country. We can't wish them away. And those that we want to attract, unfortunately, majority of them are bringing finished goods in our country. So we need to balance all these things in a manner that will assist our economy to prosper. But we are indeed in a state where maturity is needed, and we are in a state where I really believe is an opportunity that we can exploit as a country as long as we do things according to the book. We have to maintain and ensure that our quiet diplomacy is sustained. We don't have to have a microphone diplomacy where we insult any other people. We also don't have to rush to take decision on the basis that someone has taken a decision. For example, when the tariffs were imposed, if we rushed or we acted immaturely, would have damaged the country, because the same person that imposed those tariffs suspended some of them in other areas. So we just have to be calculative, be careful, and be influenced by our principles. But we must not compromise the things that have made us to be South Africans. For example, the ability to negotiate, the ability to persuade, and the ability to reach a compromise that is in a win-win situation is the hallmark of who we are as South Africans. And that's an area that we have to invest the resources and the energy and the time that we have.
Premier, thank you very much for your time this evening. That's Gauteng Premier Panyaza there speaking to us, and that is where we leave it for this evening. Clement Manyathela is back on Thursday. Good night.